Tamani prakara sadmasu kalpa briksha laksha bratesa sarabhira bipalayantam Lakshmi sahasra shata sambrahma sevamanam Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Venam kanvantam aravinda dalaya taksham Bharavatam samasitam buddha sundarangam Kandarpakoti kamaniya vishesha shobham Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Alola Chandrakala Sadvanamalya Bangshi Ratnangadam Pranaya Keli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribangalalitam Niyata Prakasham Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Asya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pashyanti Pante Kalayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chenmaya Sad Ujvala Vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achotimadadim Anantarupam Adyam Paranam Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedesha Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhaktao Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastokote Shatavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Muni Pungavanam Sopyasti Yadvapadasinya Vachincha Tatme Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Saurachayatam Jagadanda Kotim Yachaktirasti Jagadanda Chayadadantaha Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Baba Baba Tadiyoma Najasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Suktairyam Eva Nigama Pratataisthavanti Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chenmaya Rasamat Prayapabhis Tabirya Eva Nityarupa Taya Kalabihi Goloka eva nivisatya kilatma bhutto Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Premanjana charita bhakti vinochanena Santaksa deva hridayesha vinokayanti Yam shama sundaram achincha ganasarupam Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Ramadi Murtushakala Niyamena Tishtan Nana Avatara Makarod Bhubanesha Kinto Krishnak Swayam Samavavak Paramak Pamanyo Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Shvashesha Vasudhari Vibhoti Binnam Tad Brahma Nishkalam Anantam Ashesha Bhuttam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagadandi Satani Sute Tai Gunya Tad Vishaya Vedi Vitaya Mana Sattva Lambi Parasattva Vishuddha Sattvam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasamataya Manakso Yat Praninam Paliparam Smarutamo Lila Yatenu Bhavanani Jagat Yajasram Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Golokanamni Nijadamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesha Haridama Sotesha Tesho Te Te Prabhava Nichayavi Tashayena Shristi Stati Palaya Sadhana Shaktareka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichchanurupam Api Yasya Tatesta Tesa Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Khiram Yatadati Vikara Vishesha Yogat Sanjayate Nihita Tag Pritagasti Hitoho Yaksham Bhutam Apitata Samupaiti Karyad Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Deepanasya Eva Hidasham Taram Abhyupetya Deepayateva Vrita Hetu Samana Dharma Yastadrigeva hitcha Vishnu taya vibhati Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Yatkaranarna bhajale bhajati sma yoga Nidramananta jagadanda saroma kopaha Adara shaktim avalambya param samurtim Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Yasyaika nishvasita kalamatavalamya Jivanti loma vilaja jagadandanataha Vishnur mahansi hayasya kalabhishesho Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Vasvanya tankshma sakaleshu najesha tejaha Sviyankiyad prakariyad tadvitad vadatra Brahmaya esha jagadanda vidhana karta Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Yat pada pallavaya gaminidhaya kumbha Dvandve pranama samaye saganadi rajaha Vighan vilhantam anapasya jagatrayasya Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Ambarodishascha Kalastatatma manasita jagatrayani Yasmad bhavanti vibhavanti vishanti yangcha Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Yachakshir esa savita sakala grahanam Raja samasta suramurtir ashesha tejaha Yasyagya brahmati samrita kala chakro Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Dharmo tapapa nichaya shutayasta pangsi Brahmadi kpita patagada bayasta jivaha Yadatramak prakata prabhava Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Yastvindra gopamatavendra mahosva karma Bandhanarupa parabhajana matunoti Karmani nirdahita kintuja bhakti bhajam Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Yam krodha kama sahaja pranayadi biti Vatsalya moha gora gora vasevya bhavai Sanchincha tasya sadashim tanam apurete Govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami Shriya kanta kanta parama purusha karpa taravo Dhrma bhumis chintamani ganamayi toyam amritam Kataganam natyam ganabam api vangshi priyasaki Chidanandam jyoti param api tat asvadhyam api cha Sayatrakshadhadbi shavati sharabi vyasya sumahan Niveshad yakyo vabrajati yahi trapi samaya Vajay Shveta Dripam Tamaham Iha Golokamityam Vidantaste Shantashati Virala Chara Katipaye Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karanakaranam. Powerful mantras. Many devotees, I see at least one, has memorized those mantras, and memorizing comes from just chanting and chanting and chanting on probably a daily basis. Very wonderful mantras given to us by the original preceptor of our Sampradaya, Lord Brahma. And these mantras are, according to the language of Bhakti Siddhanta, there's acquainting us with the ocean of truth. As Brahma, from the chanting of his 2 Gayatri mantras, that was his tapa, very same Gayatri mantras will be given this evening. But just by chanting, because that's all there was. There wasn't anything. There wasn't any cell phone or computer or Wi-Fi, or wasn't anyone to talk to. There wasn't anything. Wasn't anywhere to go because there wasn't anything. It wasn't even 4 walls. It was just darkness in all directions, chanting his mantra. And he became absorbed in his mantra and became well acquainted with the ocean of truth. Knowledge became imparted within his heart. And we have these nice prayers that he offered to Govinda, indicating so many things within these prayers themselves. So the chanting of these prayers is for the purpose of invoking auspiciousness. Traditionally, when yajnas like this are performed, mantras are recited for that purpose. We'll do some more very shortly. One of our candidates here is not a candidate anymore. He's already initiated, but his initiation, I take it, took place virtually, and now he's taking part in the yajna to finalize his yajna, his initiation. Is that correct? A virtual initiation? Yes, okay. Okay. And the other two are devotees who will be receiving second initiation or their Gayatri Mantras. And between the two, first initiation is more important, second initiation is more serious or more strict. I'll tell a little Prabhupada story. Some years ago, when Prabhupada was giving initiations in New York, the temple president from San Diego at that time was Gunagrahi Maharaj. Then he wasn't a sannyasi, he was Gunagrahi Prabhu. He brought with him from San Diego 8 devotees to receive second initiation. Listen, Prabhupada asked for him to come see him. He went to see Prabhupada, paid his obeisances. And Prabhupada's question was, are you sure that these candidates are ready for second initiation? So he said, yes, Prabhupada, I'm sure. But because you've asked, I'll go and consult with the other devotees that came with me from San Diego, just to make sure because you're asking. So he asked them and everyone was sure, and he reported back they were sure. This is the day before the yajna. And then later that day, Prabhupada called them again. And later that day, he called them again. 3 times. So he, Prabhupada sees something we don't see, or somehow or other, he understood, at least, that Srila Prabhupada wanted the candidate for second initiation to be very, very qualified. There was some other points I can't recall exactly, like, they'll do this for the rest, they'll follow correctly or properly for the rest of their life. Prabhupada took second initiation very seriously because the duties of a Brahmana are very serious duties, as we see, directly worshiping the deity, directly touching the deity, ornamenting the deity. It's one thing, sit out here and make some garlands and make some ornaments. And it's another thing being on the altar and directly touching the deity, etc., bathing the deity, dressing the deity. It's very confidential service. And one's consciousness has to be proper to do that and not make offense and make mistakes, etc. And the other main duty of a Brahmana is speaking the message of the scripture, which is a very essential service for upliftment and maintenance of the society, not just ISKCON society, but the society. There's a great need, not only for pujaris to meet the schedule of deity worship for the temple, but there's need in the world for qualified persons to represent the teachings properly and become further purified through deity worship. The process is primarily through sound. The whole Vedic process is primarily through sound. There's a nice verse that Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami has included in his Hari Bhakti Vilas, where he describes the process of Diksha and what it does. Yatha Diksha Vidhanena Kasyam Rasa Vidhanitaha Tata Diksha Yatha Tata Diksha Vidhanena Dvijatvam Jayate Nranam. Thank you. Dvija means twice born. Dvija, twice born. The process of Diksha is understood by the learned persons as a process that's, the verse compares the process of Diksha to the process of alchemy. Alchemy is not so much known these days, but in Europe, particularly in Germany, there was a fascination for alchemy for a certain period of history. They wanted to learn the science of transforming base metal into gold. Prabhupada describes it in one lecture. What's the procedure? Then another lecture I heard, in two different lectures, Prabhupada described the procedure. And the procedure, yogis knew. Listen to this one. And in the evening, before taking rest, they would drink mercury. Now, those of you that have children, I see one small boy over here. Those that have children, they're very careful to not leave thermometers anywhere near their children, because thermometers have mercury in it, and mercury is lethal. Your child will drink mercury and he's dead. So don't leave thermometers around your children. But the yogis would drink mercury. Somehow they knew how to not die when drinking mercury. And then in the morning, when they would wake up, they would pass water on base metal, and the base metal would turn into gold by the process of alchemy. That was Prabhupada's explanation. The yogi process of alchemy was like that. Are you going to sit still? Let's see. Okay. The process of alchemy is like that. The process of second initiation is like that. That which is base metal becomes gold by process of alchemy. Similarly, by the process of Diksha, Vidhanena, the vidhis, the procedures for Diksha, make this a process where an ordinary person becomes an extraordinary person just by the process of Diksha. So the essence is sound and submission to sound vibration. Now, I'm looking at the clock, and because RT is at 6 o'clock, I think I'm going to come to a screeching halt and allow the yajna to proceed. But it's just concluding remarks. You have the aside from the needs of the temple, my understanding is there's to maintain the standards of deity worship that Prabhupada wanted, temples that have formal worship like this, Radha Krishna worship, etc. Then the very, very serious and very good standards of deity worship throughout the whole ISKCON society. So this temple, as well as all temples, are very careful to maintain that standard. And it's a great privilege, and it's also a great responsibility for you to learn the process, be qualified as you are, and take part in the deity worship. I know you want to, but take part in the deity worship on a regular basis. And speak the message of the scriptures on behalf of our founder Acharya, as is a Brahmana stuti. So we'll proceed with the yajna. And after the yajna, these two candidates will receive their Gayatri Mantras while the RT is going on, presumably. Okay.
Vaishnavne evaha evaha yatista yatista yasandehi yasandehi yasandesi yasandesi yasamukabhavo yasamukabhavo Niyamidya namaha Krishna Chirisa Swaha Govinda Sikaya Satgopijana Kavachaham Malabhyanatvyam Satsvahastaraya Eva Vaishnavagnehi Amite Karohya Parame Karoho. Sound coming. Oh. Okay. I'm going to chant the mantras. After the mantra, which says Swaha, at that time you have Tahutis. I'll be offering the ghee. You can just offer with your ring finger and the thumb. Just Om Ajnana Timinandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshu Onmilitanyena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Swaha 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 इधर yeah, to Maharaj ji. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantika Swaha 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 Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupa Sagrajata Sahagana Raghunatha Vitamscha Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Deva Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha Swaha 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 Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Ramapad Swamin Itinamine Swaha Swaha Swaha. Is there any other mantra? Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Itinamine Swaha Swaha Swaha. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatahrine Swaha Swaha Swaha. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Itinamine Swaha Swaha Swaha. Shri Varsabhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripabdhe Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Swaha Swaha Swaha. Madhurajwala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Sakti Vigrahaya Namastute Swaha 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 Namo Namaste Gauravani Sri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Viruda Apasiddhanta Dvanta Harine Swaha 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 Namo Gaura Kishoraya Saksad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambodhe Padambujaya Te Namaha Swaha 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 Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Sakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Swaha 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 Gauravir Bhava Bhumestvam Nidesta Sajjane Priyaha Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Sri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Swaha 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 Vancha Kalpa Ubhayascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaya Evacha Patitanam Pavane Bhayo Vaishnave Bhayo Namo Namaha Swaha 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 Namo Mahavajanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratushe Namaha Swaha 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 Pancha Tattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Utaram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Swaha 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 He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Swaha 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 Jatam Surato Pangu Mama Manda मते गति मत सर्वस्य पदम्बोजा राधा मदन मोहना स्वाहा 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 दिव्या वृंदारण्य कल्पद्रुमदः श्रीमद् रत्नागरा सिंहासनस्थ श्री श्री राधा शीला गोविंद देवा प्रेष्ठालिभि सेव्यमाना स्मरामि स्वाहा 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 श्रीमान रासा रसारंभी वंशी बटा तटस्थितः कर्षण वेणु स्वनय गोपी गोपीनाथ श्रीष्णुनः स्वाहा 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 तप्त कांचना गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानु सुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये स्वाहा 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 जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौरभक्त वृंदा स्वाहा 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 हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे स्वाहा 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 हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे स्वाहा 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 हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे स्वाहा स्वाहा स्वाहा. You can stand up for the Punahuti. Hold the banana in your hand. नमो ब्राह्मण देवाय गौ ब्राह्मण हिताय च जगत हिताय कृष्णाय गोविंदाय Namo Namaha. Swaha. Yeah. Good. Sorry. Okay. Somebody can chant Hare Krishna mantra. Hare Krishna mantra. Can circumvent the fire. Circumvent the fire. In a big bowl and then collect all of it and distribute it.
Take out the paper.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 I mean, I could. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shiva Jaya Jaya Gaura Chande Arati Koshobha
Shiva Jaya Jaya Gora Chande Arati Koshoba Vane Jagamana Loba Kivadake Nenitai Chan Pamegadadhara
That's okay, no problem. That's okay. You just come.
Mikate Advaita Shrini Vasachatradara Iva Bhakti Ache Gorachan Radna Simhasane Arati kore na Brahma Adi Deva Gane Ivanara Hari Adi Kori Chamaradulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Basu Goshadigaya Iva Shankar Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Bhaje Karatala Madhura Mridanga Bhaje Paramarasala Shankar Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Madhur 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 Bhaje Shankar Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Madhur 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 Bhaje Madhur, Madhur, Madhur Bhaje Madhur, Madhur, Madhur Bhaje Shankar Bhaje Ganta Bhaje Madhur, Madhur, Madhur Bhaje Nitai Gora Haribol, 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 Nitai Gora Haribol. Nitai Gora, Nitai Gora Haribol. Iba Baho Koti Chandra Jini Vadana Ujvala Kala Deshe Bana Mala Ore Jalamala Shiva Shiva Shuka Narada Preme Gada Gada Pakati Vinoda Deke Gorara Sampada Shiva Jayo Jaya Go Chande Arati Kochoba Jayo Janavitata Vane Jagamanaloba Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Bol, Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Shama Sundara Radha Shama Sundara Radhe. Jaya Radha Shama Sundara Radha Shama Sundara Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadra. Jaya Goranita, Jaya Goranita, Jaya Goranita, Jaya Goranita. Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gora Haribol, Nitai Gora Haribol. Nitai Gora Premanande, Haribol. Jayom Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parirajikacharya Stotra Satya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Sri Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parirajikacharya Stotra Satya Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananti Kota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sako Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vas Adigora Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Yamuna Mai Ki Jai. Sambhaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishi Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Someone say wishing a pram. Kids.
Answered no. No. Listen. It will take time. All of it.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Praladayadaine. Hiranya Kashi Purvakshaha. Shila Tankana Kalaye. Ito nasemo bharato nasemo. Yato yato yamita to nasemo. Bahe nasemo hridaye nasemo. Narasima Madem Sharanam Rapade. Tavakara Kamalavade Nakam Adbhuta Shinga Dalita Hiranyagashibo Tanuvringa Keshavadhita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Narasimhadev, Jaya Narasimhadev. Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bhakti Shiromani Prahlad Maharaj ki Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai.
I need a slide changer for this thing from the control room. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandan Brajajanaran Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Sodanandana Brajajanaran Jamuna Tiravana Syadi Natira Jamana Tira Bana Chadi Mana Tira Bana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Jasodanandana Brajajanaranjana Sadanandana Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Bana Chadi Tira Bana Chadi Jamuna Tira Bana Chadi Tira Bana Chadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jai Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jayo Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parividagacharya Astatarasatasi Srimad's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Gaur Premanandi. The topic for this evening, something to do with Bhagavad-Gita. And that something to do with Bhagavad-Gita has some nice instructions, and I'd like to give you a little background on what has been called Gita values. And the history goes like this. Some of our GBC members got together with some members of Oxford University, and together with some of the frontline devotees that teach Bhagavad Gita to new audiences, there was an idea to take the ivory tower of Oxford University and bringing it down to the people of this world to understand what are some of the important values found in Bhagavad Gita. So they worked on it. There's so many, but they distilled it down to 6. Not that there's only 6. And they came up after refining with some paragraphs for each of the 6 Gita values, and we're going to be discussing the first of them this evening. That's the background. And soon, if not already, you'll find a PDF of the 6 Gita values with that nice little paragraph. And you can take a look at it when you get a chance. Probably sometime when I come back and there's some evening sessions or something like that, I'll cover the other 5. So the starting point is Bhagavad Gita, and I want to take the topic and put it in context with the relationship between spiritual culture and its values. There's a nice devotee connected with the Strategic Planning Committee that gave a nice little seminar on, he called it the Iceberg of Culture. And he's a smart devotee. And so he studied how people who work in corporate and organization groups, how they take this metaphor of an iceberg, and when let's say one company buys out another company, they want to take a look at the culture of that company and want to do some, they call it cultural engineering. Look at the culture and make it nice, what they want it to be. So they use this metaphor. It's one of others, with some others. But anybody knows about an iceberg. There's the tip, but the iceberg is much more than the tip of the iceberg. And below is the massive part of the iceberg. So they call that the iceberg of culture. And as far as culture is concerned, culture, there's the observable things that you can measure. Let's see here. There we go. Perceivable, noticeable speech, conduct, habits of a organization or a group of people, or even an individual. Those are the tip of the iceberg part. And then below the tip of the iceberg are their stated values, an individual or group, or a Hare Krishna movement. It's stated values, like its official beliefs, its mission statement, and things like that. Explicit values that we or I or our group stands by. And the way it works is these two interact with one another. Behaviors influence values, values drive behaviors. So there's some interplay, but we're going to be spending time on this middle part, the values expressed in Bhagavad Gita. And in the culture of an individual and organization, it has its assumptions, unchanging, because values can change and behaviors can change, but unchanging things don't change. Unchallenged certainties, deeply held beliefs. Let's just take one from Bhagavad Gita. We're a spirit soul. That doesn't change. The constitution of the soul is service to Krishna. That doesn't change. So the idea with spiritual culture is to align the deeply held unchanging certainties with your values and your behaviors or measurable things that make up you as an individual or group. So we're taking that as a model, and we're going to focus on that middle part, the stated values, and there's 6 of them. Now, 2 more things. There's difference, some distinction between knowledge, as we find knowledge meaning in Bhagavad-Gita, not just data, because that's the bottom one, information. And then there's wisdom that you live by. So here's a little story. Some years ago, I forget the number of years ago now, maybe it was 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever it was, some years ago, in India, the education people, not just the higher education, just education people, had a big meeting in Delhi, and they wanted to focus on the education in India today. And the keynote speaker said, I see a few Indian people in the audience. The keynote speaker said, education in India today can be summarized in 5 words. Information, 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 no transformation. And spiritual, so we're not doing things properly. And then so they spent a whole bunch of time and came out with some rewards for people that they could create curriculum that could create what they called value education, because they didn't want to call it religious or spiritual. They called it value education. A lot of devotees participated and they won some awards, and their curriculum was used for value education. But that's beyond information, because information is just information. And Bhagavad-Gita is not just information, it's knowledge, but it's, when we call it, you know, when we speak in non-devotee audiences, we call it a wisdom literature. And so that you feel a little comfortable, because sometimes values are high sounding and we're not there yet. Right? Yeah. So what do you do when you're not there yet? You feel uncomfortable. There's this nice terminology I learned from Satchidananda Swami, who in some ways his English is better than mine, and his English is his second language. German is his first language. But he used this term liminal quite a bit in japa retreats. And liminal means in between this and that. So that's what the diagram is meant to show. There's where we are on the left side, walking through a door, wanting to get over there on the right side. And there's a big gap, you know, a big gap between what we know and where we are. Big gap. And when you're moving between where you are and where you want to be, it can be, the transition can be uncomfortable. Ask any teenager. Transition is uncomfortable. Going from being independent to, independent adult, or somewhat independent, more independent. It's anything there's a transition. Whatever, you can think of some nice examples of the world. It's uncomfortable. So there's books written about sociology that encourage, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Because if you want to make progress, you can't just keep doing the same old. If you want to make progress, you have to be able to be uncomfortable a little bit as you're making a transition from where you are to where you want to be. That's good. So when you're hearing Gita values and you realize it's for real, it means this, and we're down here, that's okay. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Get used to trying to reach beyond where you are at present. And here's the good news. The good news is Krishna is there to help you. Yay. Okay. And the journey is an interesting one. You don't know exactly where you're going, but you know you're going. And you're following the wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita to help awaken natural values, and we're going to start with what this group of scholarly and education-oriented devotees came up with to explain the first of the Gita values is Samadarshana, or equal vision. Equal vision. Sama Darshanaha. Now, how do you have equality when there's so many differences? Now, you'll never see a tree like this with so many different fruits on one tree. But, you know, fruits are variegated, and insects are variegated, and birds are variegated, and aquatics are variegated, and animals are variegated, and there's more variegated animals. So lots of variety out there. So many differences. But we're supposed to embrace this Samadarshana, or equal vision. So how are you supposed to do it when there's so many differences? Or not just differences in species, but amongst the human population. So many cultures, so many languages, so many colors, so many attires, so many different flags, so many differences. And now we have this nice challenge to have equal vision, Samadarshana. And then there's an individual that react differently to different situations. And lots of differences between how people respond to things. We were speaking a little bit about this over the weekend. Shrishti and Drishti. Drishti is how you see things, and Shrishti is how things really are. And they don't always match. And so different persons are going to respond differently to different situations. So here we have different life forms, different people, different situations, different exchanges. So how are we going to do this Samadarshana thing? How are we going to be able to see with equal vision? You ready for the key? Here's the key. Notice the graphics. The bottom right, there's a key. And the upper right, there's a lock in the shape of a heart. And the key opens the lock. And Bhagavad-Gita has the key. You ready? Here's the key. Gita's idea of equal vision speaks of the equality of all living beings, where life is respected regardless of race, gender, caste, creed, or species. Now you'll see this language directly in that little paragraph that you'll get when you open up your mail from the temple. And so the outside is not the essence, it's the inside. No, the inside is this wonderful spirit soul. This is an illustration that comes from some years ago. The BBT created a Bhagavad-Gita interactive, where the 5 main topics of Bhagavad-Gita were put into a DVD, and it doesn't work with modern computers, so I can't show it to you. But this is where the image comes from. And you see all those sparks in the sky, and there's one inside the bird and inside the man and inside each of the entities. That's that spark of life. That's the commonality is this eternal, unchanging spiritual energy. That's how Samadarshana becomes possible. If you just see the covering, you won't see Samadarshana. You see differences. And if you see the soul within, at least conceptually, then you have that option for Samadarshana. So all living beings have that sameness. They're all spirit souls. Another BBT painting showing different ranges of species up to the heavenly planets. And there's one thing they have in common, at least, and that's they're all spirit souls. So there's a little spirit soul. That little skinny guy, that's us. Spirit soul. And the spirit soul is eternal, cognizant, and blissful. Just as Krishna is, qualitatively one with Krishna. As Krishna is Satchitananda Vigraha, the small sample, the angsa of the Vibhu is eternal, cognizant, and blissful. So saying the same thing a different way, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. The cute photograph. Some of us who have spent time living in temples have this experience. It's kind of diminished, but there was a period of time when it was really happening a lot, where professors, high school, college, et cetera, people would bring their whole class to the temple because they're studying, world religions. When they study this one, they like their students have the opportunity to come to experience. And I learned, this is a couple of things I learned. When the teachers teach what's the differences of religions, they largely focus on the rituals. This religion differs from that one because of the rituals. So they like to come when we have our rituals. For them, the rituals is they come before deity greeting, and then that's a ritual. And then the curtain opens, and the singing, the Govinda prayers, and we pay our obeisances 3 times before the altars, and that's a ritual from them. And then we go to the back of the room and we do another ritual. We have Guru Puja, and they, stand and watch, take pictures, and we're doing our rituals. And then we sit down and sing Jai Radha Madhava, that's another ritual. And then we have our, morning class, which is another ritual, as far as they're concerned. So my experience is, different teachers want different things, but they want us to not just give a 101 class. They want us to do what we do so they can observe what we do. And then when it comes to questions and answers, before we get to the questions and answers part, this is something that I learned, especially for younger audiences, it's better than college kids. But you're looking out at the audience and you ask, could you tell me which of the students here is the smartest one in the class? And everybody always looks at one person. They know who the smartest person in the class is. So then this is interactive. Do you mind if I ask you a question? And, I'm the smartest one in the class. I'll answer any question you have. So the exercise is, can you point to your head? Can you point to your arm? Can you point to your leg? Can you point to your chest? Now, okay, can you point to you? And sometimes they go like this. It's to help them get the understanding that you say, my head, my hand, my arm, my leg, my foot. There's the object and there's the possessor of the object. And where you are, then comes to some teaching. So that the soul is situated within the body, and the soul, then, the teaching says, the soul is very tiny. How tiny is that soul? Well, we have teachings about the size of the soul. Keshagra Shatabhagasya, we know this from Svetashvatara Upanishad. When the upper point of a hair is divided into 100 parts, and again, each of such parts is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the soul. It's because it's actually aprameya, you can't measure it. It's right in Bhagavad-Gita. So it's so to speak, the point is, it's very, very tiny. It's smaller than the atom, and who's seen an atom? So who's going to see a soul? What to speak of its spiritual energy, not material energy? People aren't going to see a soul. And although it's very small in size, that tiny, tiny soul animates the body of a squirrel and the body of an elephant. The same spark of life, but very, very tiny. Very, very tiny. Now, let's go to Bhagavad-Gita, because we're doing Gita values, right? So here's a nice verse from, I have to look over my shoulder because Really? You sure? No. Okay. The contrast is not so good. But here's the verse from chapter 15 of Bhagavad-Gita. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. Thus, he enjoys a particular set of sense objects. Now, the human form of life has very well developed each of the five senses, and life in material existence is pretty much absorbed in trying to enjoy the senses. And spiritual life means to dial that down a bit. And even if we have different bodies than this human form, we want to recognize there's a spirit soul within. Okay, that's nice. Okay, what are some of the characteristics of the spirit soul? Spirit souls, we learn, are conscious and consciousness. What does that mean? Have you heard that before in Prabhupada's teachings? I heard it enough times, I pondered on it a lot, and then came to understand what he meant. I think I came to understand what he meant. Just like a lamp in a dark place. The lamp gives light, it's luminous, and the lamp lights up objects in the room that otherwise would be lit up, because without a lamp, it's not luminous in the room. So similarly, the soul is conscious and spreads consciousness through the body, and for that matter, can spread consciousness beyond the body through the senses. And consciousness in different living entities have different coverings. This is now taken from Bhagavad-Gita. One kind of covering is compared to the covering of an embryo within the womb. Consciousness is covered. Living entity within the womb is still conscious, but very covered. It's likened to the consciousness of a tree that's also very covered. Oops, sorry, there's the tree. And then there's another, like a mirror that's covered by dust, that's less covered than a tree, but it's still covering. So that's ignorance. And then this other is the passion model. And then the third is the goodness model. That's fire covered by smoke. This is purport of Bhagavad-Gita chapter 3, 38. Consciousness is covered. We're spirit souls, but consciousness is covered in different ways, in different degrees. And that covering is the illusory energy. It's that which has a tendency to have us accept we're something that we're not. Therefore, so here we go. Here's the verse from Bhagavad-Gita. The humble sages, by virtue of true knowledge, see with equal vision, samadarshana. A learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. While seeing differences, there's samadarshana. That's right in the verse. And that equal vision, the sama, is the spirit soul that's within, not the covering, but the spirit soul that's within. Now, the previous verse was stating that consciousness is covered in different degrees, like a living entity within the womb of the mother, or a mirror covered by dust, etc. So there's different coverings, but the spiritual sense of Samadarshana is, although there's differences, there's this vision awards personhood to all, links everyone with the divine grace, and consequently with each other. Now that's not common. People may speak, but not have that actual realization or understanding. And so we're going to take a little closer look at that understanding. Equal vision begins with seeing ourselves as what we are and seeing other living beings as who they are truly. Some of you may have attended the class that was, when was it? Is that yesterday evening? Yes, yesterday evening we were discussing Rupa Goswami's teachings on relationships. And dysfunctional relationship is where one person doesn't know who they are and the other person, they don't know who the other person is, and they're trying to have a relationship. If you think that you're the body and you think another person is they're the body and you're trying to have a relationship, it's going to be a dysfunctional relationship. It's not going to be a true relationship. It's you know, a nice try. And there may be some exchange that makes you, feel this is an important relationship. But true relationship and spiritual understanding requires Samadarshana. Now, here's a little exercise in making this presentation to audiences. I'm not going to ask you to do what this exercise says other than you think about it. Okay. What are some challenging situations where you feel that you cannot see different people with equal vision? This is it's a real, think about it, question. Think of one person in your life with whom you have difficulty now or in the past. Write down. Well, I'm going to give some pause where you can think about it. If you have a little handheld device or a piece of paper or something, you can write it down. Write down the incident and how you felt when you had difficulty with that person, either recently or sometime in the past. And with your inner vision, consciously see that person as a spirit soul, no matter how they may have behaved externally. I'll share something with you. I've made this presentation with a number of audiences, primarily with college student audiences, and they said this particular slide and the exercise I asked them to do was the most meaningful, because everyone has had some bad experiences with somebody, in the past or currently or whatever. And to see that person, see that person as a spirit soul, it may, generally it does, have a significant impact in how you feel towards that person. They're not the behavior, the tip of the iceberg, remember? They're not the behavior or speech. And behavior and speech is often driven by the values of that person. But that there's something beneath all of that, and that's the unchanging reality of who they are as spirit soul. I mean, just today, some home visit, somebody was saying, in the workplace, there's a supervisor and he uses really bad language. And he speaks very openly and condemning and condescending and bad things about people right there in the workplace. It really troubles me. How do I handle this supervisor that's just says dirty, nasty, mean things about people? So there's the behavior. There's the value that drives that behavior. Most likely that person was a victim and now they're being a perpetrator. Someone dealt with them harshly and now they're being harsh. And they think that's good because then I can control things in the office. That's how you control things in the office, is you show who's boss. or whatever their value is that's driving that behavior. Some hurt inside and they're acting out that hurt. They're trying to not feel that hurt that they're feeling by hurting other people. It doesn't work that way. Anyway, whatever it is, see the person as spirit soul. And your feelings towards the situation, and specifically also the person, is likely to change. So that's a Gita value that we're presenting. Again, this is part of an exercise that some educators at Oxford University, some devotees that teach Bhagavad-Gita regularly, and some leaders in our society got together and wanted to help share to others. If you don't have to be in the ivory tower of Oxford University, you're just an everyday person. What are those values and how can you benefit from those values? And they flow one to the next. So again, you'll get a PDF. And if you're not in the mailing list, ask somebody that is part of this community and they'll help you become on the mailing list so you can receive that little document. It's meant to help improve our consciousness, and with improving consciousness, the quality of our experiences in life. Life around us, as we know, from Bhagavad Gita and from experience, there's duality. And sometimes you're honored, sometimes you're dishonored. Sometimes there's happiness, sometimes there's distress. Sometimes. It's a place of duality. It's the nature of the place. And it's not going to become something other because it's the nature of the place. So how do you navigate your way through a place where there's duality and all kinds of differences? And Bhagavad Gita is teaching you samadarshana. There isn't it's not doable without a spiritual conception of the other. And it starts with the spiritual conception of yourself, because you can't see others that way if you don't see yourself. And then how do you treat others that way? The Bhagavad Gita gives us these nice lessons. And again, it's on the values part, but values ultimately are resting on something, that unchanging certainty and reality of life, and which we've forgotten largely. And Bhagavad Gita wants to revive that consciousness of who we really are. Okay, so I'm going to end with that. A little abrupt, but I think that's okay. And so that we can see one another, if we could turn the lights on in the back, that would be really nice. And then anybody that would like to raise some point or discuss something, you can do so. I think we have a portable microphone in the sound room back there.
Yes, Maharaj.
You have one?
Yeah.
Okay. If somebody would like to discuss,
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
okay, I can't see because the light's in the way, but go ahead and speak.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you so much for the class.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I wanted to go back to that supervisor example. As you said, can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. He's just like, I want to be able to see you.
Yeah,
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the supervisor example you gave. So you said that we should look them as a soul. So we can look them and we feel comfortable, but that person is on the bodily conception of life.
That's okay.
So, I mean, will it not exploit us again and again if we don't stand up for ourselves?
Okay. You're concerned if you're seeing another person from a spiritual perspective, is that going to leave you vulnerable
Yes.
for exploitation? Okay. Okay. It's possible. However, seeing as the spirit, let's take this example. Prabhupada's example. If you see other living entities with equal vision as spirit soul, when you see a tiger, what do? You go and embrace the tiger? No. Your behavior is appropriate for the situation. You see the differences, but you're relating to the soul within. Therefore, respect and equanimity goes towards the soul within, but behavior is going to be different according to the covering. And from one time the covering is this, another time the covering is that, because things change. So we make choices of behaviors according to what's appropriate for the circumstance. But that when spiritual consciousness becomes matured, we don't leave the spiritual conception because somebody might try to exploit me. We stay with the spiritual conception. You may do all kinds of things. You have more freedom than if you're afraid they're going to exploit you. Your freedoms of choice are very big. And you can growl. You can do whatever is appropriate for the circumstance, depending upon what's appropriate for the circumstance. But don't deviate from seeing them as spirit soul.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. I'll give a little example because I don't see a lot of hands up. This past weekend, we had a really nice experience in Gita Nagari. There were 100 people who didn't know anything about spirituality that came to Gita Nagari for a thing that was called Body, Mind, Spirit experience. One of the persons that came is a graduate from University of Connecticut. I didn't know that till afterwards, but she had an interest, she shared, in environmental law. And her question was, is there anything contradictory with becoming part of a cause, activism, and spirituality? It's not your question, but it's related. So but my answer was the same as my answer to you, and that is, if you have an interest, you connect this interest with something that's going to lead to your maturing of spiritual life. However, if you leave out the maturing of spiritual life part and just do the activism part, it's limited and incomplete, and you'll never be satisfied. And I guarantee you probably already have that experience. How much can you do with environmental law? How much can you do? Because if people have an exploitative spirit, you check it over here, it's going to come out over there. You check it over there, it's going to come out in 10 other places over there. So what to do about that exploitative tendency is not just create law. You have to have change of consciousness. The modes of nature that are operating people who are greedy and exploitative, the root has to be addressed. So back to your question, same. If somebody has a tendency to be exploitative, there are people certainly that are like that. They're harsh and cruel and find some weakness and they'll go chew them up. Okay, there are people like that. Now, I don't want to leave the spiritual conception of who I am and who they are. And, I'll let me navigate and make my choices where I have a spiritual conception. At the same time, I'm very tuned into the best means of being in a relationship or being in service to this other person. Maybe distance myself from this person. As far as possible, distance myself, or respectfully distance myself from this person, or whatever it is. Whatever it is. Ah, I saw you coming in. I'm really happy to see you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Maharaj. Yeah, this Gita 6 values has,
You've heard it before.
yeah, a couple of times. And so I was excited when you brought up this subject today. So I was so curious to know what the other 5 are.
It's in the PDF.
Oh, okay.
If you don't mind waiting till you get the PDF.
I'll try to hang on.
Okay. 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 If you want, I can recite them. You want that. I can tell by your energy that you want it. Okay. Okay. Nonviolence, number 2. Humility, number 3. Acharya, number 4. Choice, icha, number 5. And guess what the last one is? Priti, love. Okay, that's just it. But the little paragraph and the explanation of them just now coming. Anything else?
Guru Maharaj, I had a question.
Okay.
Maharaj, you know how you're saying for the environmental law student, she would not find satisfaction how much ever she tries to, check something here, it's gonna come out from here, check something here, it's gonna come out 10 times worse.
Speak slowly.
Yes, Maharaj. So is it like sometimes people think they're satisfied in the material world?
Wait a
But-
while.
Yeah, and sometimes they also think that even though there are calamities, they are more satisfied than they would be in spiritual life. In their mind and in their hearts, they feel like they're happier than they would be. So how would we address that situation? How would
Depends
we?
on the person, how I would address that statement. Depends. Prabhupada would address it, birth, death, disease, and old age, for example. So you're feeling, and okay, here's an inevitable disease, old age, and death, and then again birth, and you're happy. Great. Supposing you had that same, whatever it is, contentment that you feel without those 4, wouldn't that be a better model? I mean, it depends on the person, and how covered they are, and how flexible they are, and how curious they are. Sometimes people are just plain argumentative and just offer them prasadam or something. I mean, depends how I would respond. This particular case, this girl, I took it at least that she is very sincere, and it turns out that she is continuing contact with the event organizer, and they're having some nice exchanges. I don't know exactly on what, but she's a sincere person. She wants to. She's very. She spent a long period of time getting a degree in law, in environmentalism. So she's invested in it. Fantastic. Now, how to spiritualize that effort so it has some deeper, lasting effect besides just adjusting things by better laws or enforcement of laws or whatever it is.
Yes, Maharaj, thank you.
Here we go, following mom's example, huh? Okay. If I don't see some more hands, I'm going to tell a couple Prabhupada stories.
So if it's okay, I would like to give this question some context based on a conversation I had with a woman that was born in India. She was describing how, well, the first thing she said that set me off was how the stories of the Vedas are mythology.
The story of the Vedas is mythology.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then as she was speaking, I realized that there was some contempt towards the way women and men are depicted. Like her experience is that women are depicted with a lot of anger and emotions, whereas the men are depicted with in a more benevolent light. So my question is actually, because my instinctive response was that, our human conditioning really taints like our understanding of the Vedas. And maybe it can also be in part that there's more of a limited, experience. But secondly, my instinctive response was that the Vedas are Satchitananda. And I'm wondering.
Wait a minute. You got to stop when the curtain closes because it's so noisy. Jai Sri Radha Shama Sundara ki jai. There you go.
And actually, I realized that I haven't per se heard of the Vedas and the scriptures described in that way. So I'm wondering if that's a correct way of understanding the Vedas and if there's a better way to understand them.
Okay, you're not asking for how to respond to this lady. You want to check your own feelings in regard for the Vedas.
Yeah. I'm just giving some context because because we can misunderstand.
It challenged your view. Okay. Well, the term Satchit Ananda has to do with form. Satchit Ananda are adjectives of vigraha or form. And the Vedas are feminine, like Radharani is feminine, or the goddess of fortune is feminine. The Vedas, they also have form, the personified Vedas. And yes, Satchitananda, and because they're connected to the Supreme, they're directly emanations from the Supreme, who is Satchitananda Vigraha. So they're the potency of the source of everything, the Satchitananda Vigraha, Supreme Person. So your understanding is correct. And likely, this lady that you're depicted that may have felt the way that she felt, or reacted, responded, or expressed herself the way that she felt, because of a kind of demeaning way that she felt women are depicted as opposed to men. It has a lot to do with association, and therefore persons like ourselves that are getting introduced to the knowledge of the Vedas in the proper way, it's very important for us to carry ourselves with the proper character and conduct and speech that represents the Vedas and represents spiritual teaching. Because achar speaks louder than prachar. Your character speaks louder than your words. It's more compelling and more convincing. It's a fact. It's a fact. So to help this lady, it may take some time of interacting with her, where whoever is interacting with her, you or others, don't have that. You have deep faith in the Vedas, and you don't have that, harsh disposition or condescending disposition or whatever disposition. Your character is different as well as your words. That's compelling. That can change people better than words.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare, excuse me. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. So my question is, and this may sound redundant, but please forgive me. Sometimes I think people might feel like there's probably like only one or two ways to be like to be spiritual and to follow in the bhakti path. And my question is, how can we embrace nuances in ourselves and in others while still being faithful to the true essence of the Vedas?
Well, your question is right on topic. Thank you. And Prabhupada's term is unity in diversity. There is diversity, different diverse expressions of spirituality, or even, even more specifically, Krishna consciousness. There's diversity. And diversity is not only just fine, diversity is beautiful. Prabhupada, in a discussion with an Irish professor, I forget his name, Prabhupada gestured to a vase of flowers. Right just by the front, right side, left side of the Vyasasana, there's a vase of flowers on either side. So a vase of flowers is beautiful when it has different colors, different types of flowers, different fragrances that enhances the beauty of the vase of flowers. Differences enhances the unity because they're all flowers. And some of them are just greens of flowers, but it's flowers. And so diversity is beautiful. And the criterion of spirituality where there's diversity is it's rooted in the Vedas. It's rooted in the transcendental knowledge that comes from the transcendental source of knowledge. And when it's rooted there, there's going to be, naturally, there's going to be diversity. Naturally, there's going to be diversity. Here's a little example. It's just one little example. There's a devotee I know that currently has a lot of interest in Ramayana. And because of his interest in Ramayana, he has developed a liking for the different commentaries of Sri Vaishnavas on Ramayana. And there's a lot of different commentaries, a lot of different conceptions or realizations in their commentaries about Ramayana. And then he took it another step. There's the North Indian and South Indian. I forget the Sanskrit terms, but there's two divisions of Sri Vaishnavas, followers of Ramanujacharya. Then he took it a step further. There's 18 different explicit distinctions. He sent me a chart, a PDF that has like these 18 distinct, and that's just in one tradition. And I'm sure there's subdivisions of those too. But there are Sri Vaishnavas. There are things that are essential amongst them. It's one of the primary efforts that Bhaktisiddhanta made, which was recognizing the four sampradayas, and here are some differences, and here's what's the same. And he was trying to express the gift that Lord Chaitanya gave of taking teachings from each of the four that were very important to those four, and establishing them in his teachings to bring unity in that diversity. So there's certainly place for it. And now the criterion is it rooted in the Vedas? Is their understanding rooted in the Vedas? And following the tradition of that line, the disciplic succession line. And there's diversity within disciplic succession lines. There's room for it.
Maharaj, I had one last one.
You have one?
Yeah.
And then I'm going to end. Go ahead.
Maharaj, this is almost like the flip side of her question. I was just confirming my thoughts. Is it true for me to think, or is it correct for me to think that diversity is respected amongst spiritual practitioners, but when somebody's diversity is, compromising standard foundational principles, it's wise to distance ourselves from that person.
Yeah. Yes. We can be respectfully keeping ourselves at a distance. When principles are compromised. Lord Chaitanya taught that. And he displayed it. And he also provided a means for someone that was in that zone, that the principles were being compromised, for their edification and correction. He didn't like toss them to the side. He was wanting, if they were willing, for some self-improvement. So we should be careful. Don't deviate from principles.
Yes, Maharaj.
There's some nice examples of this. Here's one that just, I'm going to tell a little story and then we're going to end. During the life of Rupa Goswami, that probably almost all here know who Rupa Goswami is, one of the principal follower of Lord Chaitanya, Rupa Goswami, living in Vrindavan. And there was a traveling debater. His name is Rupa Narayan. And Rupa Narayan traveled all over India, defeating people left and right. And he had big following and he had wealth and he was really, powerful debater. And he saved Vrindavan for last. So he went to Vrindavan and he heard about, who's the most exalted person here. I want to debate them. And it was Rupa Goswami. So he went to Rupa Goswami and said, I want to challenge you in debate. And right away, Rupa Goswami could understand the nature of the person, really proud, really brazen. And so he just said, oh, Rupa Narayan, you're so powerful, you're so great. There's no contest. I submit you've defeated me without any effort. He said, very good. Put it in writing. Sure, you defeated me without any effort. So, in principle, someone that's proud, and in this, there's a Sanskrit term that indicates their mood is not to understand, the mood is simply to defeat another person. Then, we keep a respectful distance from such people because it's violating a Vaishnava principle.
Yes, Maharaj, that's clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Madhupati, you want to do some announcements? Here's a microphone. Hey, don't disappear, everybody.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for being here. So I'd like to thank His Holiness Prabhupada Maharaj to be in the CNJ Yatra and giving today's class with a loud Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Today's Sunday feast is sponsored by a few families. So let's see, 1 minute, hold on for 1 moment. Yeah, it's somebody has sponsored anonymously for 1 year death anniversary of Poonam Mataji, and seeking blessings for Poonam Mataji to be engaged in Lord's service. Let's thank them with a loud Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. On Tuesday, there's Ekadasi, minimally chanting from grains and beans. We'll also have Ekadasi Kirtan here from 7 to 9 p.m. And next Tuesday is Akshay Tritiya. So we'll have some program here in the evening. And any other announcement, Mr. Nadu? May 14th is Narsinga Chaturdasi. Saturday, May 14th is Narsinga Chaturdasi. We'll have a program here from 5 to 9 in the evening. Let's thank everybody with a loud Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. We'd also like to thank the devotees who took second initiation today with a loud Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Vajranath Prabhu and Taruni Radha Mataji and Jagdishwar, Achyuta Prabhu, who got first initiation a couple of weeks back and who was here for the yagya. Thank you very much. Haribol, Hare Krishna.